great to be here in Maryland. If you would have asked me if I thought that I'd be speaking to an abolition group in Maryland, I don't even know what abolition is, but I mean, it's very cool. So, like Jody said, my name is Joseph Silk. I served in the Oklahoma State Senate for 6 years. Me and my wife Kimberly have 8 children. Number 9's on the way. I brought one of my boys with me. My kids get to hear some very interesting comments. But so to cut to the chase, I'm not going to try to convince you that abortion's morally wrong and killing an innocent life. I think what Jody's talking about, the audience, the people who are here, we're all kind of all on the same page as far as that goes. So instead, what I want to do is I want to take my time and I want to give you some information of what I have dealt with serving in the Senate for 6 years and kind of how that can be applied and hopefully help you with your abolition fight here in Maryland. And you know, I know that there's differences, large demographic differences, and how the legislature is made up and everything between Oklahoma and Maryland. But most of these principles can be applied in any state, no matter how liberal or what the makeup of the legislature is. So, an overview of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about really 5 points, and I'll try to get through them fairly quickly. So the first point is going to be the difference between pro-life and abolition, or equal protection. You'll hear me say abolition and equal protection. Like Jody said, it's the exact same thing. So if I say abolition, I'm talking about your equal protection bill here. The parallels between and similarities between the abolition of slavery and the abolition of abortion that we're dealing with today, kind of the cultural and political similarities are eerily similar. And then number 3, how those of us who understand that abolition is the only proper way to move forward, how we have to change our way of thinking about these pro-life bills. 4, how to get involved with your legislature and spreading the word and building your grassroots coalition. And then 5th, we will talk about some common objections, what you're going to hear from your pastors and from your delegates and elected representatives and from your neighbor, other people in your Bible study, or whoever it may be, some of the objections you'll hear. And then we'll have a question and answer time, and you're not going to offend me at all. So she said, ask your toughest questions, please do. If I say something that you're just like, you're a crazy guy from Oklahoma, and this is what I think, that's fine, and we can debate and see what happens. So to start out, the difference between pro-life and abolition, huge difference. So since Roe v. Wade, who considers himself pro-life or has in the past? Probably everybody, including myself, right? That has been the go-to movement. We hear, they present this bill, they pass this bill, these are victories. And so the majority of our churches are pro-life, the majority of Republicans are pro-life, but the problem is the pro-life organizations have never intended to actually end abortion, ever. And I want you to keep in mind, everything that I say comes from the most pro-life state in the Union, Oklahoma. The state Senate has 48 state senators, 40 of them are Republican. Okay, this is the most pro-life state in the Union. So if I can say it, I can only imagine what you can think about in Maryland. So, and if you don't believe me that their intent is not to call abortion murder, call your local your local National Right to Life folks and ask them, be like, hey, do you think children need to be protected equally across the board? You're immediately going to get some, or call your large church organizations or church institutions and ask the pastors if they will get behind an equal protection bill. You're not going to get the answer that you think you will. And this goes to show in 2 ways. One, abortions are on the rise after 47 years. Pro-life organizations have raised millions of dollars and have had thousands of volunteers, and they have failed miserably. And they'll say, oh, look at all the thousands of babies we've saved. No, they haven't. That's not true at all. Look at the legislation that they author. So, the Down syndrome bill. You'll hear this touted by pro-life. And American Family Radio. Does anybody listen to American Radio? Okay. Even American Family Radio does not understand that these are not good bills. You'll hear this on American Family Radio. They'll tout, oh, such and such state passed the Down syndrome bill, where if the baby in the womb tests positive for Down syndrome, you can't kill it. But what that bill actually says is, if the baby doesn't have Down syndrome, you can go ahead and kill it. Okay? Or what about the pain-capable bill? You can't kill your baby if the baby can feel pain. But if it can't feel pain, you're good to go ahead and kill it. That's what that bill says. The ultrasound bill. You have to view an ultrasound of the baby once you see a picture or video of it. Then you can kill it. It's very sick and demented. But this is what our churches, our pro-life organizations tout as victories. The 3-day waiting period, which was a big deal in Oklahoma. If you want to kill your baby, you got to go in, say you want to have an abortion, meditate on it for 3 days. Once you've meditated, then you can go ahead and kill it. You just have to wait. You just have to think about it. Those are pro-life victories. So what we've got to get in our head is any bill that does anything other than completely abolish abortion and provide equal protection across the board without exception is actually more detrimental than pro-choice legislation. And I'll talk about why that is. So in Oklahoma, for example, you'll hear about, well, we can't do anything about, until Roe v. Wade's overturned. In Oklahoma, and again, the most pro-life state in the union, if Roe v. Wade was overturned today, abortions would continue without a hitch in Oklahoma because of all of the pro-life legislation that we have. The pro-life legislation, the pro-life bills that we have on the books have created legal avenues to have, you just have to kill your baby this way, you have to kill it here, and this is when you can kill it. So again, and I want that to sink in, if Roe v. Wade was overturned today, abortion would still be legal in Oklahoma because of the pro-life bills that we have. Roe v. Wade's not the problem. Now, pro-life laws that have been passed and celebrated as victories, those are the problems. And again, what other organization, and it goes to show, of course we haven't been successful because abortions are on the rise. I mean, what other organization would still, and I'm talking about an organization, pro-life organization, raise hundreds of millions of dollars, thousands of volunteers over 45, 46 years. And they've done more harm than good. And they're still going strong. It's a very, very big issue. Those are pro-life bills. Equal protection bills, such as the one that we have copies of back here, and such as the ones I've run in Oklahoma, they're long bills. They need to be long. They need to be thorough. They need to be well thought out. They need to cover all the bases. But in summary, it defines that life begins at the moment of fertilization, states that the intentional taking of that life is murder, and lines up with all other murder statutes, and that any court opinion saying otherwise is null and void, because courts don't have the authority to authorize killing innocent children. They do not. So that's the big difference, and if you take nothing else away from tonight, know there's a massive difference between pro-life and equal protection. They couldn't be farther than from the opposite. So the parallels between abolition of slavery and abolition of abortion, this is the second topic here. So keep in mind that slavery, according to the Supreme Court, was legal. Black people were private property and had no rights. That was the other great sin of our nation, right? The Supreme Court says that. The Supreme Court also says that you can kill your babies. And the way that this is playing out is unbelievable. So, for example, during the time of slavery, there was people who were interested in setting up paths to citizenship or incremental approaches to, well, if they do this, then maybe they can kind of get out of the slavery thing, right? And the South kind of went along with that. Abolitionists started rising up in the North. And so when the abolitionists started rising up and said, no, this is actually completely immoral and unjust and all people are created equal. When that happened, the South actually turned and went the opposite direction and said, no, actually slavery is a necessary good. It's not even a necessary evil. This is a good thing, which is almost identical to what places like New York and California are doing. Hashtag shout out your abortion. When the pressure's put on to actually abolish it and be consistent and equal and treat all humans equally, then they want to go the opposite way. So that's happening right now. You'll be painted as radicals to say that you believe all life is, needs equal protection. You're going to be a radical. Just like the people who said, no, all men are created equal, slavery's wrong, you got to get rid of it. They were painted as radicals. Oh, that's going to be bad for the economy. What's going to happen in Maryland if Maryland abolishes abortion? What's going to happen in South Carolina when they abolish slavery? You're going to get the exact same argument. It's bad for the economy. It's radical. Your pastors are not going to want to preach for the abolition of abortion. The pastors didn't want to preach against slavery at that time either. And a good example I have, which I shared earlier, was a good friend of mine who's been a pastor at a church for 10 years. He said, I want you to come to my church and present the difference between abolition and pro-life. And so I said, okay, I'll come. He told the church. The board came to him and said, nope, we don't want that to be talked about in the church. This is an independent Baptist church in rural Oklahoma, a couple hundred members. He said, well, it needs to be talked about because this is really, really wrong. So he had me over. Half the church didn't show up. I gave my talk on Sunday evening. On Monday, the board convened and fired him. He also took abolition flyers for an abolition day at the Capitol and hung them up in the lobby, and the board members went and ripped them all down. This is the kind of stuff that happened when they abolished slavery. Churches were split. Families were split. You were considered to be an outcast. So just know that as you go out and you push for this, the similarities and the pushback are very, very similar. And I've talked to legislator after legislator about this, and they're like, well, I've literally heard them say, if I get behind that, that's going to tarnish my reputation. That's what they said before the Civil War as well. Moving on to number 3, changing our way of thinking about abortion. So even though we understand that the Supreme Court has zero authority to say that killing your child is murder, we understand abolition and equal protection is the way to go. We have to continue to treat Roe v. Wade as null and void and forget everything. All of our little conniving ways to, well, if we do this, they'd have to uphold it and they couldn't strike. No. We have to treat it for exactly what it is. Local and state governments have to ignore Roe v. Wade. They have to. That is the only way that we can do it. So stop all the creative little legal ways to do this and this because they're not going to work. Now, to say that, there's a group of lawyers in Louisiana who got together several times, and they say a lot of pro-life bills being the bad bills that Jody talks about, the bad bills, will get struck down in court because they're not equal, they're not consistent, they're highly discriminatory, right? So if you want to overturn Roe v. Wade, I think you ignore Roe v. Wade, that's what I think. But if you want to overturn Roe v. Wade, there's very smart legal people that say the only way to overturn Roe v. Wade is to send a bill of straight-up abolition that is uncompromising, that treats all humans equal. They couldn't overturn that. And I agree, because if you provide it equally across the board, what are they going to say? Because it lines up perfectly with the Constitution. So, either way, you want to overturn Roe v. Wade, go for it. Get behind a bill of equal protection. You want to ignore Roe v. Wade? Great. Get behind a bill of equal protection. Either way, we've got to start thinking that way. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a theologian and pastor in World War II, during the time when the Nazi regime was going crazy, he died in the Flossenburg concentration camp. But he said, we're not simply to bandage the wounds of the victims of injustice, we are to drive a spoke into the wheel itself. And that's the problem is a lot of our pro-life organizations and churches are just kind of bandaging the wounds. But we've got to treat it just how we treat it, not the German. So moving on to number 4, what do you do about it? So you understand abolition. You understand that pro-life incrementalism is bad. You understand abolition. You've changed your way of thinking about it. You understand the parallels between it and slavery. What do you do about it? And I say begin with lobbying the legislature. If your elected representative, your delegates here, or senator, doesn't know you on a first-name basis, they should. Because what was the number in Maryland? 30,000 babies a year being killed? At least. They should know you by name if you care about this. In Oklahoma, we kill 5,000 a year, which is 5,000 too many. And I tell people there, your elected representative needs to know you by name. So build a relationship with them. If they don't know you, call them, get to know them. Go set up a meeting, send them an email, take a group of people. They need to know who you are. Even if they are the most liberal Democrat out there. They need to know who you are, and they need to know you're a voter who lives in their district, and that you're watching them on this issue. So now, when you do that, and I come down on legislators really hard. I've got a whole speech on how bad the legislature is. I didn't do that because I don't know you guys, right? So you guys may be the good. In Oklahoma, there's like 4 good ones out of like 101 for real. So, but saying that, when you do that, when you start to build that relationship, know that legislators are going to fit into 4 categories when it comes to this issue. And this is the Republican pro-life ones, this is your liberal ones. They may be ignorant. They may have no idea that they just thought that the pain-capable bill was a good idea, right? They may be ignorant of what the real problem is. They may be a hypocrite. They may sit there over coffee and say, I 100% agree with this bill. That's amazing. And then they go to the Capitol and they do the opposite. They may be a hypocrite. They may be a coward, which is most of them in Oklahoma. They agree that life begins at conception. They agree it's murder when you intentionally take it. They believe there should be no exceptions, yet they don't have the backbone to actually just vote for it. So they may be a coward. And the last one, which apparently we have some, they're an abolitionist. They believe in it, and they're going to try to get it passed. Those are your 4 categories, so know that. Now, the power that you carry as a constituent is pretty big, because not all of them, I'm not talking about some of you guys, just keep that in mind. Most legislators, 98% of the legislators I know, all they care about is re-election. That's it. They don't want to make enemies either way. They want the easiest path to re-election. And if they know there's a controversial bill that's going to that they got to choose sides on and make enemies on, they're going to want to stay away from it. But they're also going to want to keep you happy, right? They do fear their constituents, especially if the constituents are educated and informed. And it doesn't have to be on every subject. Just pick one, just this one. Be like, hey, I know that when this bill gets a number, I know if this bill number, we support it, I know exactly what it does, and I expect you to co-author it. They're not going to have read the bill, I can almost guarantee you, because they don't read bills. But pastors have huge influence. If you're a pastor, they really don't like when pastors get involved, because pastors have an audience to talk about, right? But I'll say this, even if you're a stay-at-home mom and you do Facebook, they're not going to like that either. I've had multiple senators come to me and be like, I got a homeschool mom in my district who's all worked up about your abolition bill, and she's getting my wife's friends all agitated. This is true stuff. You can actually make an impact on your elected representative. And to really drive that home, so earlier this year in February, I made a motion to make my abolition bill, Senate Bill 13, eligible to be heard on the floor. It wasn't even a vote on the bill. It was just making it. I made a motion to make it eligible to be heard, to where we could deliberate on it, amend it, talk about it, whatever. And in Oklahoma, on the Oklahoma Senate floor, only 4 senators voted in favor of it. Oh. Now, myself and one other one, diehard abolitionist, the other 2, the only reason they voted in favor of it was because constituents were on their case about it. And when I mean constituents, I mean like, what? Literally. So one of them, Senator Chris Kidd is his name. There was a pastor, a dedicated abolitionist pastor, and his parents that lived in his district, and he was at the Capitol multiple times. And when I went into Senator Kidd's office to talk to him about this bill, he was literally crying because the pastor put so much pressure on him, and he knew that he was going to have to do something against leadership's will. And he was just like, I'll vote for it. And that was it. And so he voted for it. Wow. The other one, my brother is a major in the Air Force, and he was stationed in a district that this other senator was from. And so we knew a lot of acquaintances there, and I made one phone call to an abolitionist up there. I said, hey, I'm going to make this motion tomorrow. I need your senator to go with me. He said, he'll go with you. Made one phone call that morning, and that's the only reason he voted for it. So imagine, if we can do that in Oklahoma, imagine if you're able to take 20 people, 20 voters to your delegate or your elected official. They're going to listen. And even if they don't do what you want, they know you're there, and you're really going to stir them up. So they do respond to constituents. Now, saying that, that's the legislature. Do the same thing with your circle, okay, in your church. If you're a pastor, preach on this subject. If you're a church member, go to your pastor and ask them to educate themselves and preach on this subject. If you have a Bible study or you teach Sunday school, talk about that. If you're at work, you can get in real big trouble and bring it up at work. And start spreading this, being like, guys, we've been doing this wrong. We're killing 30,000 babies a year in Maryland. We got to stop it. And there's this bill that Metzger is going to carry here in Maryland. We've got an opportunity to do it. So do that. Now, fifth and finally, is the common objections, and you'll really want you're going to deal with some objections. So in Oklahoma, and it's going to happen here in Maryland, you're going to deal with 3 large organizations that are going to oppose you. The first one's going to be pro-life organizations. They're going to hate it. They're not going to get behind it. They're going to say this is going to set us so far back. It's just not true. You're going to deal with pro-life organizations. You're going to push back. Your large church organizations or your large churches are going to push back. I say that to people, and they're like, no, my pastor's going to be totally for it. I'm like, go talk to him and give me a call. Because 90% of the time, the pastor's like, well, that's pretty harsh, that bill. So just do that. And expect it. Your pastor, church organizations, and then the Republican parties will not like it either.
Oh my goodness.
So get ready. Even though life's in there, they're not going to like it. I fought my party for a long, long time. The Republican Party is not going to like it either. So know that. Now, on the bill itself, they're going to say that an equal protection bill is unconstitutional. That's going to be your number one thing. Oh, yes, that's unconstitutional. First thing you should do is be like, how's that? They're not going to have an answer to it because they have no idea. That's just what their staff gave them as a bullet point. And they're going to try to talk down. They don't know. Because what you can say is, no, it's actually upholding the Constitution. Roe v. Wade was unconstitutional. Because see, you hear a lot about unconstitutional bills. Like, you believe a legislational bill? But have you ever hear that about a Supreme Court opinion? No. Well, that's an unconstitutional opinion, and we need to ignore it and actually uphold the Constitution. That's the way we need to be thinking about it. So you'll hear it's unconstitutional. All you got to do is ask them how that is. Ask them if they know the Supreme Court ruled that slaves were private property and had no rights. Did they think that was okay? And if they were a legislator at the time, what would they do about that? That's going to make them really uncomfortable. So, another good one on that is the marijuana, which I just spoke about earlier. Marijuana in 2010 in Gonzalez versus Reich in California. So marijuana is a class 3 drug, I think, right? Federal statute. So keep in mind that abortion, there is no federal law that says abortion is legal. None. Okay, there's not. It's a Supreme Court opinion that they just came up with. So, but there is laws, federal laws that have passed through Congress and the Senate and been decided about marijuana. So in 2010, Gonzalez versus Reich ruled that states can't distribute marijuana. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, you can't do that. Everybody's doing it. So many states, the majority of the states are distributing either medical or recreational marijuana. What's happening? Nothing. The Supreme Court's like, oh, whatever, they didn't listen to it. That's what's going to happen. So they're going to say it's unconstitutional. They're going to say abolition or equal protection calls for secession, and you're seceding from the Union. You will not. All you got to do is say, can you point to me in the bill where it says that? They're not going to be able to because it doesn't say that. That's not true. All the bill does is take state sovereignty and upholds the Constitution, just like every state is to do. They'll say that equal protection bill will put all mothers who have an abortion in prison. That's not true either. And that's a scare tactic. That one comes from the churches a lot of times. They're like, oh, we can't put abortive mothers in prison. They're like, oh no, that's not what this bill does at all. All this bill does is protects all humans equally. So a good example is if an adolescent girl gets pregnant by an abusive boyfriend, and the boyfriend forces her to have an abortion, is a prosecutor going to prosecute that girl, and is the judicial system going to put her in prison? No. No way. Are they going to prosecute the boyfriend and put the boyfriend and the doctor in prison? Probably, as they should, right? So this bill doesn't say what has to happen. This is up to prosecution and the judicial system. You have a 35-year-old career woman who's pregnant, 7 months along. She's going to lose her promotion if she keeps the baby. She decides to kill the baby. Are they going to prosecute her? Probably, as they should. But this bill doesn't dictate who does and who doesn't. We had some good conversations about it earlier. It's going to be treated just like any other murder. Okay, so if you got a special needs person gets pregnant and there's an abortion, is that special needs person going to be prosecuted? What about a special needs person who commits some kind of murder? It's going to be the same thing. We're wanting to be consistent and equal and protect all human life, just like the Constitution says. Abolition does not allow for a mother's life to be saved if the pregnancy is dangerous. That's another big one. That's not true either. So all we're saying, we're just basic medical triage. Doctors are required to exhaust all medical resources to keep everybody alive. to the best of their ability. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. If a mom and a 2-year-old son are in a car accident, come into the emergency room, there's one ER doctor, he's doing everything he can to save both, and the 2-year-old dies, is he on the hook for murder? No. He did everything he could. And that's all we're saying. And in Oklahoma, I took existing language out of the medical code that just charges doctors to exhaust all their medical resources during triage. That's all we're doing. Literally copy and paste it. Abortion would create backroom unsafe abortions. Well, murders happen in dark alleys because they're illegal, right? That doesn't mean, well, you know what, let's legalize murder so that it's done in the daylight, people can aim properly, or whatever. That's the most ludicrous argument I've ever heard. And I've heard some very educated people come at me with that one. But no, of course there's going to be bad things that happen. People are going to go and do bad things. That does not mean we need to legalize it. It's unbelievable. So those are some of the objections. And then I did talk a little bit about Roe v. Wade, to overturn it or to not overturn it. Because another objection is we need to overturn Roe v. Wade first. If somebody says that, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's cool. This bill's the only way to do it. So if that's an objection, you can talk about it and be like, the reason that Roe v. Wade hasn't been overturned, if that's your objective, is because there's never been an equal, just, consistent bill presented to the Supreme Court, because the pro-life organizations won't get behind it. So, and I'll finish up here with a little bit about the movement of abolition has been unbelievable. Tens of thousands of people in Oklahoma are completely on board. The pro-life organizations in Oklahoma are basically silenced now. They understand that they don't even really present bills to the legislature anymore because they know they're a joke. And they know the people of Oklahoma know they're a joke because they don't do anything. And then so in 2016, the first abolition or equal protection bill I authored in the nation, the history of the nation. 4 years later, at the end of next year, there's going to be 10 states who have filed abolition bills. So for one subject, that's moving really, really quick. So the movement's awesome. So just to recap the difference between pro-life and abolition, the parallels between abolition of slavery and abolition of abortion, changing our way of thinking, getting back to just defying the courts and upholding the Constitution. It's constitutional. How to lobby the legislature and spread the word among your circle is vitally important. That's where we've got to start. And then went over some of the major objections. So it does seem like an unachievable goal. Like, can we really end abortion? I mean, it does seem unachievable. But there's multiple surveys out there among younger people. They're much more sensitive to this topic.
Yes.
Some of it's due to medical technology. Some of it, I think, God has played a huge role in it. But the young people of today are much more receptive of treating all lives equally than they were, say, 30 years ago. So that's on our side. And we got to remember, we know the God we serve, right? And look at world history, look at biblical history, the story of Noah, Joseph, Moses, David. Those were unachievable things, but they happened. And in more recent history, the Revolutionary War, we weren't supposed to beat the world superpower at that time, but we did. Ending slavery, people said that would never be done, and it was done in a fairly short amount of time once it really got going. And then the Nazi war machine. We were not supposed to beat the Nazi war machine, but that did too. I think that's because God orders all things when His church and His people hear His call, organize, and then respond, because we are a tool for Him. So that's what we've got to do. We've got to come together. We've got to say we've been doing it wrong. This is the route forward. We're going to get involved. We're going to get educated, and we're going to start spreading the word. So another quote by Dietrich Bonhoeffer that really applies to this is, "Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." And we've got to take those principles and apply them to what we're dealing with today. So